All right, we are on fire. Oh yeah, this is going to be great. Let's see if I can jump over to some stuff. Here, let's see, it's Visual Studio. I've been there before. Let's see. This is going to be a different type of session. This is not going to be like your normal session. I'm going to start with a whole bunch of slides and then rush my demo at the end. All right. Which will probably not work, right? Just teasing. Okay, I will tell you this. This session is going to be in, we're going to be in Visual Studio. I mean, that's where XAML takes place. I did not misspell it. It is not XML. It says Windows XAML. Extensible Application Markup Language is no longer what it stands for. What does it stand for now? It stands for XAML, right? I don't know. Who's in charge of this stuff? But that's what we're here to talk about. Let's just pretend that you can go to 12 years of school. The first year is first grade, the 12th year is 12th grade, and then you graduate from high school. What level is this class, this session going to be? I love to teach, by the way, so I think of things as classes. This is third grade. If you feel like you are excited about first grade, then just try and catch on a little bit, you know. If you are in college, just, be cool. You don't have to, don't embarrass me. This is meant to be the beginner's guide to XAML, right? Not the absolute beginner. I can't teach you what the difference between an open bracket and a closed bracket. I think that's too early. So we can go through some basics, and we will, and I love it. All right, so let me talk about XAML just for a second. Oh, I got to talk about me. Oh, hey, this is my Twitter, @JerryNixon. You guys are all over Twitter, I'm sure. It would be awesome if somebody in here, like all of you, snapped a picture and tweeted it to @JerryNixon. What's that cost you? Nothing at all, right? We all have Wi-Fi here. And it would be fun for me to show my wife that I'm actually doing something, right? Because all the pictures I've sent back so far are at like restaurants and all these cool things, and to see me working would be terrific. All right, so try and get one with my eyes open. Okay, that's really good. She's going to love that. All right. Now, what were we talking about? XAML. Oh, yeah. Okay, I am a Microsoft developer evangelist, right? So a developer evangelist is the guy who evangelizes to you, the developer. This probably makes up the entire developer track here at TechEd, to be honest. So, at Ignite, right? And so, the fact that you all are here at a XAML session is like a dream to me. If you have ever coded in XAML, please raise your hand. That would be 100% except for you. You didn't, so I'll speak right to you. And I was trying to remember. Wouldn't it be awesome if I could remember your name? But I only took like 80 names, so I can't do it. But I think of myself as a XAML evangelist because I talk about XAML all the time. And I mean, like for example, I just did a session on background tasks, right? And they called, they were like, hey, will you do this thing on background tasks? Like, yes, if I can do a XAML session, right? Because to me, it's important to talk about XAML because XAML is the future of UI tech at Microsoft. And I'm going to prove that to you in just a second. It's not just fun. It's not just crazy productive. It's not just really powerful. It also is very strategic and important if you call yourself a Microsoft developer. Not everybody does, right? And there are plenty of good people that don't. I get it, right? But we, the Microsoft developers who are writing for the Microsoft Windows platform, we pick technologies that Microsoft is embracing, right? It wasn't so long ago, 2006, we introduced WPF. WPF, beautiful. It's the godfather of XAML. Super duper powerful. Very interesting fact about WPF you may not know. The entire execution engine written in C#. Isn't that fascinating? Not a C++ execution engine. That made it so we weren't able to port it as soon as we got into Silverlight. Because remember, Silverlight was in the browser, but for every possible operating system, which means Mac. And so we had to rewrite the execution engine. And so while we did, we wrote the Silverlight engine in C++, right? And so all of a sudden, it's a new specification, better to say a subset specification of the WPF XAML spec. And so now WPF is XAML like this, and now we have Silverlight, right? Quite small. Silverlight then goes to version 2, 3, 4, and 5, and it becomes really nice and rich and awesome, big again. Becomes a Venn diagram instead of a child relationship, right? It overlaps WPF a lot, but has capabilities WPF doesn't have. Sweet. All of a sudden, Steve Jobs comes on and he says, there will be no more, what did he say? Plug-in, that's right. There will be no more plug-in in the browser, which means Flash, you can just go straight to where Flash goes whenever it's not installed. And so that meant, boom, right? Now all of a sudden, well, wait a minute, we're Microsoft. We have a browser plug-in, and it's nice too, you know. But the inevitable was written on the wall, and so Silverlight, of course, became one of those products that doesn't get enhanced any further, but we have a full support lifecycle until the year 20 million. So Silverlight's still around, really nice, right? What's the Silverlight team doing? They're like, oh my gosh, my job is in jeopardy. Meanwhile, Windows 8 is being worked on. Windows 8 is all JavaScript and HTML. Wow. All the apps written for Windows 8 are and so here's a whole team of people, and they're like, what? JavaScript and huh? And the Windows team's like, that's the future, man. Everybody knows HTML5 is the future. And so, interesting, I wonder how many HTML5 sessions are here at Ignite. That's fascinating. Doesn't matter. But the point I'm making is they were saying that while the Silverlight team was like, you know what? I'll bet we could get XAML to run in Jupyter. Jupyter's what Jupyter was the XAML attempt, right? They run XAML on Windows 8. I bet we could write Jupyter and have XAML execute inside. Okay, well, you know, you better do this skunk work because Windows team says the future is HTML and JavaScript. So they did. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere was born the Jupyter project. And Jupyter was XAML on Windows 8. And they said, let us show you how it performs. Holy awesome, right? That's nice because, you know, you make some mistakes in WPF. That's the way it goes. It's your first time writing a whole framework. You go to Silverlight, you make it better. You make some mistakes in Silverlight. It's your first time tagging on to things. And when you do it again, you make it better. But the reality is we went from WPF to Silverlight, bam, 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 bam. Now we go from Silverlight into Jupyter, another subset. So there are pieces of XAML that we certainly know how XAML works, and we certainly love how it executes, but there are pieces that are missing. Thank goodness now it's Windows 8, Windows 8.1, Windows 10, so we're comfortable again. Certainly there are things that we have plenty of room to add on to. And like a Venn diagram, it's taken another direction as well. WPF didn't care about performance because you were running on desktops that had so much memory it didn't know what to do with it. So you could do anything. You could just bloat that baby to bits, and man, some of you guys are good at that, right? It's incredible. And so people started having this reputation. WPF seems a little slow to me. Really? Maybe you suck. And so it turned out Microsoft gets the blame. It's not your guys' fault. It's our fault, right? It's not you. It's me. And so now we go into Jupyter. And now we go into XAML for Windows. Windows XAML, I don't know what we're going to call it. But now we go into the next Windows, and or the next version, and this one is all about performance. And you're going to see some constraints around XAML. Like, you can't do that. What do you mean you can't do that? Because it's not fast enough. Let me give you an example. I create a control. I can make it look whatever I want. And one of the things that I can set as far as a property on any control is the clip, right? And so clip means draw a frame around this, and outside of that frame, don't draw anything. So what I can do, let's go to WPF for a second. I could create a clip that's shaped like a star. So I could have an input form that users input all of their mortgage information, and I could clip it to the shape of a star. Believe it or not, you could, and people did it. And so that was what we call, that's free geometry clipping, right? You can do almost any geometric shape that you want. That's cool, I suppose. What can I do in Windows? Can you clip? Of course you can clip. To the shape of a star? You can do it to the shape of a rectangle. Oh, no, that's different, and it totally is different. And so you see little constraints like that. Well, what's better about a rectangle than a star? When I talk to the composition layer of the composition subsystem of Windows, bam, right? It can draw a rectangle like it's going out of style. The only thing it can draw faster is a triangle. That's just because that's the way GPUs work. But give it a star, and it's got to assemble the star based on different shapes, right? So it's not super duper awesome. And so as a result, we're like, well, we'll pick what's fastest, because why do you need to cut things into a star anyway? Well, it turns out it would be nice to cut things into some shapes, but that doesn't matter now. Why do you see some of these limitations is because it's all around performance. Why do you see other limitations is because this is a baby technology. And I don't mean to say it's new, because that's not fair, right? XAML's been around now almost for 10 years. It's robust. The tooling is awesome. As they rev the tooling for WPF, we get it over on the Windows XAML side, and everything just flows and it's nice, right? So it's not like it's not like it's nascent, right? Not that type of young. But it's young as in it's Jupiter. We haven't had XAML on Windows in this modern environment for all that long. And so we haven't implemented everything. Sometimes we don't implement it because something doesn't belong there. Sometimes we just haven't gotten around to it. Kind of like how Windows 8.0 didn't have a date picker. Because back in 2012, we didn't use the calendar for anything. It was the first thing people would do. It's ridiculous. All right, I'm just teasing about that. I'm not. I mean, we all wrote our own date pickers back then. Now there's a date picker, right? They want us to applaud for it. Okay. Let me talk about Microsoft's emerging XAML story. See this guy? I just caught his attention. He's like, what? Emerging? Emerging? Right? Yeah, that's right, buddy. It's the emerging XAML story of Microsoft. Let me tell you something awesome that will prove to you, if you had any doubts, that XAML didn't have a future. So people come to me and they often say, because they're thinking of Silverlight, I mean, if you're a Silverlight developer and Microsoft says, we may not be revving Silverlight because there's no competition and no reason nobody wants it anymore, that's rough, right? I mean, if you're a Silverlight developer and you hear that, you're like, dude, that sucks beyond belief. My career's like on the balance now. Meanwhile, I hear everything's HTML, JavaScript, and Windows 8. You know, screw you, Microsoft, right? That's kind of how it went down. It's a bummer. That's just, things could have been handled differently, but I want you to know, I am not in charge, right? And so I was just starting with Microsoft back then, right? Somebody walks into my office and they're like, Silverlight is dead. I'm like, oh my God. I thought it was true because I didn't know the whole story, right? That's just the way it went. But people still come to me, right? And they're like, I heard that Silverlight, no, they just say XAML now. I heard that XAML is dead. I'm like, no, XAML is not dead. If XAML were dead, all that I'm about to tell you is wrong. And it's not, because it's all true. Windows 10 is a major change, and one of the things that we're changing is the fact that there are so many UI frameworks in Windows. So many UI frameworks. Office wrote their own UI framework. There are about 5 because Windows is old, right? There are about 5 other UI frameworks in it. So how does the Windows 7 classic start menu appear, right? What technology does that use? Does it use GDI? Does it use Start? There's all these other choices that are all internal UI frameworks that you guys don't get to play with, right? And most of them are some are awesome. Some of them are like engineering miracles, right? They are so capable of what they do. But the reality is you get so many, and then the guy who's so proud of it goes to another company or whatever, who's able to interact with that. Now I've got to learn 5 things in order to rev up Windows. Windows becomes a maintenance nightmare. And so people inside Windows are like, we need to figure this out because this is a problem. Let's see if we can hone in on one UI framework. What's the one UI framework that Windows has chosen to write Windows from this point forward? That's a good guess. You are correct. JavaScript and HTML5. No. Oh my gosh. Can you imagine the quantity of JavaScript to write an operating system in? You would have to have an operating system to run it too, is what's hilarious. All right. None of that matters. All right. Here's XAML, the future of Windows. The new start menu, right? I got the start menu on the side, so all you people were like, I got to have my start menu small. Now you've got it, and it's written in XAML, right? The full screen start menu, XAML. The new action center, notification center that slides over, XAML. The new switcher dialog, XAML. The file explorer, XAML. Oh yeah, right? I mean, nobody can afford to rewrite all of Windows overnight, so there are things that aren't XAML, right? That's true, but as things get revved, as things get introduced, XAML all the way around. Now, it's also important to know that what the framework they're using is called the XAML UI framework, right? The XAML UI presentation framework, I think maybe is what it's called. None of that matters, right? Well, that does matter. It's just the thing I say. So that framework is the identical framework that you're using when you're writing Windows apps. So it's not like, wow, I bet the XAML framework they wrote for Windows is cool. I wish I could use it for my apps. It is exactly the same one. That's point number 1. Point number 2. So the next version of Office is coming, right? We all knew that we shipped the desktop in Windows 8 so that we could include Office, right? A very important product to us. And but now we also knew that Office had to be rewritten. It had to be rewritten not as a Win32 app, but as a touch-friendly app that could run across different devices and architectures, right? We knew that. It was just a matter of time. So we did, right? And we call it, what do we call it? The Gemini Office, I think. And that entire, so just imagine taking Office. You can take its logic because those guys are sharp. Wow, the Office team is not fooling around, right? Just think about the execution engine for Excel alone, right? 90% of the world business runs on Excel. I mean, period, right? There's no QuickBooks. It's just an Excel spreadsheet. That's just the way it works. Think of how much people rely on that. So what do? They took they took their logic, pulled it out, rewrote the UI, and I gave it away in XAML. All of Office is now XAML. So there's a couple benefits here. One, let's go to Windows as XAML. Windows is using XAML. Windows is intolerant of poor performance. That's the way it goes. If you're going to hit start, then you get to see the start screen now, right? And if you're going to give me a UI framework that doesn't, I'm not interested. That's the Windows team. So the XAML team's like, holy crap, right? They're measuring stuff in milliseconds now. This is a big deal, single-digit milliseconds. This is a big deal. And so now the XAML team has said, okay, we did it, finally. And we look at the XAML framework, and it performs so that Windows says, perfect, right? That's what we wanted. So we got super performant XAML. Then we come over to the Office team, and the Office team is like, we're glad that it's really high performant because we need that. But we need a bunch of features. I mean, so much stuff. And we need a lot of capabilities because we're Office, man. And if we're going to switch over to your silly framework, they probably don't talk like that, but if we're going to switch over to XAML, XAML's got to be able to do it. I don't want a bunch of workarounds and a bunch of la-di-da. I want it to work. So it did, right? Now all of Office now uses XAML as well. Two awesome things that you get, right? Third thing. The third thing is we call them MSN apps. They used to be the Bing apps, but they're the first-party Microsoft-written apps that ship with the operating system. It's not bloatware that ships with the operating system. Now, there's tons of them, right? I mean, there's the weather app and the mail app and stuff that it's cool. I mean, you use them, right? I mean, if you use Windows 8, you don't uninstall the weather app. It's awesome. And so these first-party apps, they're groovy, and they do a lot of stuff, and we're about to introduce a whole slew of them, right? And they do cool things. Just wait. It's going to be great. To the point where I could pretend to see a scenario where you don't download anything from the store, right? We're really shipping all the bread and butter sort of stuff that you need with Windows. But forget that, because that's not about XAML. So those apps, they are written in XAML. That is exactly right. They get the performance that Windows demands, and then they get the features that they demand on Office. So now we have crazy scenarios. Brand new, right? All these crazy scenarios. Internal development teams, all the engineers are like, you know what our app should do? And they do it. And then they get to this place where like, well, that doesn't work, right? So now you get even more capabilities in the crazy scenarios. This is real. I don't know if they talk like that. So you as a XAML developer get to benefit from all of that because this is all happening behind the scenes. I don't need to like open up the kimono and tell you about this, but it is so cool. So is XAML dying? In your dreams it's dying? No possible way. Now, are there a few, this is worth saying out loud because I think it's important to say. There are a few first-party apps that ship with Windows that are in JavaScript and Win.js. JavaScript and HTML5 is what I mean, right? That's important to say because those are completely supported directions for an app to go. And it's important that we have first-party apps there that rely on it to make sure we don't neglect it, right? That part is important. So if you look at the list of all of our apps, there is going to be a subset written in other technologies. Another thing that's worth saying is that these XAML applications that we've written, guess what they use as a back-end language? Do they use C# or do they use C++? You all look so smart. No, I'm just kidding. But you are wrong. So, no, all of these applications use C++. Why do they use C++? Anybody want to guess that one? It's the fastest possible thing you could do, right? And the last thing you need is the built-in apps of Windows to totally blow. And we don't want that to happen, right? So they're all written in C++. So from a guidance point of view, Should we use XAML as our front end? That seems like a no-brainer, right? Just look at what Microsoft is doing. Absolutely, you should use XAML as a front end. Does it mean you have to use XAML as a front end? Absolutely not. If you have an HTML application or a team of HTML JavaScript developers who want to put together an app and they don't want to learn another technology, go for it. If you have a team of developers or you're writing a game and you're all DirectX developers and you're not really thinking that XAML makes sense because this is a game after all, yeah, you should write it like that. But otherwise, your starting point is XAML, right? Now, what is your underlying language starting point? Is it C++ or is it C#? Well, I'll tell you why it's C#. Weren't you hoping I was going to say C#? If I was going to say, like, yeah, you guys need to write C++, right? And so the girls don't like you anymore. So, no, that wasn't good. That wasn't good. There's just a thing, when you go to a party, you know who the C++ developers are like that, you know? You're just like, I'm going to sit over there. It's just, I mean, they're smart. There's no getting around it. Anybody here consider themselves solely a C++ developer? You know what? I'm not even, my eyes are closed. Don't raise your hand, please. That's not what I meant to ask. Anybody here prefer C#? Or a managed language. So if you're a VB developer, you can also raise your hand. You can feel like you're part of the team. All right. What are the functional differences between C# and VB? Nothing at all. You know, maybe like, I mean, it has more to do with your resume than anything, I think. So it has, if you look at what VB can do, VB 2014, I think they're calling it 2015, is that right? Version 14, that's what it is. It's dynamite, right? Obviously, we have extremely smart people working. There is a tremendous future to VB because there are so many of you that use it. Right? Microsoft pulls the plug on VB, you would kill us. There's no getting around it. There's too many. And VB developers are kind of a special breed by themselves anyway, you know, and so they're easy to upset, is what I mean to say. And so C# developers, oh, you guys know what's rocking and rolling. I can show you new syntax and your saliva's going, right? You show a VB developer and they're like, where have you been? What's the problem? I've been waiting for this for 6 months already. I'm like, okay. You got it now. All right. Except you. I like you a lot. Because you're a XAML developer, see? Because that's where the common bind that bonds us as brothers is XAML. That's exactly right. All right. So why is C... Okay, I said C#, but I didn't sell it. Let me just sell it for a second. This is my last slide, so we're okay. Yeah, you wondered for a second. The C# is now, there's a brand new friend to C# called .NET Native, right? We refer to it internally as Project In. And so we've always had something like this. So let me step back just a second to Windows Phone. Back when we had Windows Phone before Windows 10, you would submit your app to the store, and then your app would go down to one of your phones. And then the phone would then JIT it, right? The just-in-time compile. And it would JIT it, and it would be ready to go. But it was never like that because you just don't carry, especially back then, we had like the Samsung Flash. Remember that old one? Anyway, they're just not fast phones, right? And so you need to compile it in the cloud before it gets to the phone, so you don't have to wait for that long JIT to occur so your app doesn't look broken. All right. So they're like, let's do it. They're like, wait. Can't do that. Because it turns out every piece of hardware is different. The chipsets are slightly different, and all the commands aren't quite the same. You're going to have to build them special for each type of device. Like, wow. And what does an engineer say to a problem like that? No problem. Just give me more RAM, right? And so they started the project of Triton. Project Triton, which is funny because we also use that for the HTML rendering engine, which has nothing to do with it, right? So Project Triton was the ability to take your application MSIL, your Microsoft Intermediary Language that you've compiled from C#, in the cloud and compile it down to all the possible variations. And then when a phone asks for it, it tells us its type, and we give it the one it deserves, and then that's the solution. Well, it turns out there's a lot of chipsets, and there's only more coming. That was not the perfect solution. The perfect solution is Project N. Well, as we would shard those out and create all these different builds, we called that Tritonization, because engineers are not English majors, and so they take words and make verbs out of them, right? Things like, I'm going to architect this problem. Like, architect, that's not a verb. You can't architect anything. You could be an architect, but you can't architect. Doesn't matter. You design is what. That's a verb. And they roll their eyes because they know better. So they Tritonize. They were Tritonizing, but that wasn't good enough. What we needed was Project In. What we needed to use was the C++ optimizer to take your C# code and write native code out of it, right? That's .NET Native. And it's here, right? It arrives this year. For the first time, it's in Visual Studio 2015 right now. If you're in Visual Studio Visual Studio, let me just show you a little magic trick here. This is Visual Studio 2015. It looks a lot like Visual Studio 2013. But you'll see up top it's in debug mode, and that means every time I hit debug or hit play, it will compile it to MSIL. That's the Microsoft Intermediary Language. Remember how it goes? You write it in C#. That compiles to MSIL. Then you hand that off to the .NET Runtime, which does the final compilation for you. Remember, that's the old way. That's when we were on desktop.NET, right? We're on a new world now. So right here, I'm in debug. Debug allows me all kinds of wonderful magic because, honestly, Visual Studio, which is the most tremendous IDE there ever could possibly be, right? And I know I'm an evangelist, and that sounds a little religious to say that, but let me just tell you. I love comparing Visual Studio with Eclipse. Oh my gosh. I taught this class at Berkeley, where you want to get those guys anyway, you know what I mean? And so I'm there, and I'm like, so we have a tool called Visual Studio. Has anybody ever heard of it? They all raise their hand. I'm like, well, that's cool. I'm like, and how many of you installed it today? And they all raised their hand. I'm like, okay, so you've never used it before, but you installed it because you knew I was coming to teach a class. All right, good. So I said, it's a lot like Eclipse. How many of you like Eclipse? They all raised their hand, right? Because that's all they know, right? I'm not blaming them, right? It's not their fault for being born with a silver spoon. And so I said, listen, I go, Visual Studio can do really neat things. Let me give you an example. Whenever I'm looking at my source code, I can put a breakpoint on any line and hit F5 to run it, and when it runs, it stops at that line for me. And they're like, Shaw, you know how they do it. And I'm like, wait a minute, you can do that in Eclipse? Yeah. Oh, okay. I can hit F10, and it steps into my code, so I can go one at a time and see all my variables. Shaw. I'm like, oh, you can do that too. I can hit Shift F10, and it debugs backwards. It's like sobs swerving everywhere. It's awesome. And so I'm like, all right, now that's Visual Studio, right? And then there's so much else, right? There's IntelliTrace and all these other things that just Eclipse is a fine tool, but it's very specific, you know what I mean? And you have to add all these add-ons to even try and emulate what Visual Studio do. Nobody invests into an IDE like Microsoft does for Visual Studio. It's just terrific. It's a $1 billion business. Is it $1 billion? I don't know. I made that part up. It's a big dollar is what I meant to say. It's a big dollar. We make tons. I mean, Visual Studio Ultimate is $12,000 per developer. I mean, of course we're going to make it nice. All right. What was I talking about? Visual Studio. Oh, yeah. So see right here, I have debug set. But if I drop that down and I go to release, which none of you seem to do before you build and deploy. In fact, I don't know if you knew this was here, but there's a drop down right here. You could switch to release. Takes your PDB out, makes it more optimized, runs faster, can't backwards compile it. All right. Anyway, you go to release right there, Visual Studio 2015, and it will compile to native code on your machine, like all the way down. And that causes you a bunch of stuff. One, it will run much faster than MSIL. Two, you can't edit and continue anymore, right? I mean, there's certain things. I mean, it's now machine code. You're not going to be monkeying with it. And so there's a lot of neatness there, but that's where we get with .NET Native. .NET Native takes it and goes straight down to the machine code. I'm an enterprise developer. I'm writing an application. I'm going to sideload it onto whatever. I want to make sure this runs awesome. I use .NET Native, which is just right here. I switch over to release. I use .NET Native and make it machine code. It's super performant. Why? Because it uses the exact same optimizer that C++ uses. The exact same one. All those C++ smarties, and they are smart, right? I'm not saying that. It was other things. They are able to rev their optimizer so that C++ gets better and better and better. And every time they do, so does C#, because we use the exact same optimizer. That means the machine code that I write out. Now, you might be asking yourself, now, wait a minute, Jerry. Well, I guess you'd be asking me that. How is this possible to have machine code and run inside a runtime? You guys are so 2013 on this. There is no runtime. What are you talking about? The .NET runtime? No. That is the desktop scenario. That's not going anywhere. I don't mean that. I just mean that's not where we're headed. .NET Native runs on the machine. It doesn't need an intermediary runtime. Then I know what you're saying. Then you're saying, now wait a minute, the .NET framework was very useful to me because I could run on different platforms. Well, as it turns out, Microsoft has worked that out with the universal platform, with the Universal Windows Platform, the UWP, Universal App Platform, right? We do the same thing. You write your app, I'll run it on HoloLens. You write your app, I'll run it on a Raspberry Pi. You write your app, I'll run it on a desktop. Whatever it is you want, done. What was it the runtime gave you? The runtime gave you, it gave you type safety. It did. Well, that's because type safety comes at JIT time, right? You don't get type safety at runtime. So type safety at JIT time was awesome for us because we could compile and know it wouldn't go wrong, right? C++ developers have to run it and really test it, and we don't have to test. And so, right? Here's another quick thing, just to show you. I don't know if you guys know this exists. There you can say file new project, and it's sort of tucked down here, but it's a test project node. Turns out you can do all kinds of stuff that most of us had no idea, right? It's pretty neat. Anyway, it's fully supported with C#. Back to the runtime. All right, so one of the things it gave me was type safety. I get that type safety anyway, right? Because that comes at compile time, not at runtime. So I already have type safety. Another thing it gave me is brokered access to resources, right? So whenever I would try and access a resource, the runtime would do it for me. I didn't have to figure that out. Well, conveniently, whenever I write a UWP, a Windows app, right, the new kind of apps, I use the Windows runtime. That's not a runtime. That's just an exposed set of APIs, period. It's not anything that executes. It's just a front end or a facade to a bunch of APIs that I get to use. And so I have that to interact, but it does broker stuff for me, which is terrific. I want to interact with the file system, but the user says no. Who's going to stop your .NET application from doing that? Nobody. Only the Windows runtime can make the user finally in charge. I could write, you guys couldn't because you don't know how, and you would never do this. But I could write an app to wreck a machine in milliseconds. Oh yeah, milliseconds. I mean, just give me registry access and I could do that, right? I could, all the kinds of things I want to do. A Windows app, how fast can a Windows app wreck a machine? Well, I don't mean this 100%, but I mean it 99 point, a lot of 9%. It cannot. It cannot. That's because it is completely sandboxed, right? There are these little things that are important around that. So we've got the .NET runtime, which gives us tons of cool capability, but we've also got the Windows runtime now for modern apps, and there is no runtime that it runs in because I'm hitting against the metal directly because I wrote it in C# of all things, or VB, either one. Actually, there is support for VB, but I think it's just not right now. But I mean, it's in the next couple months. Not that you guys care about performance. So I'm teasing. You care about performance. So I have these two runtimes. Thanks to .NET. Where's the .NET? This is a common question I get. So then where's the framework, right? Remember the .NET framework? Let's separate these two concepts. The .NET runtime, which executes your application, and the .NET framework that gives you things like system.io. Right? Remember that? And system. Tons of cool stuff that we use. System. That's all the .NET framework, giving you tons of helper methods, base classes, all the BCL is there, interfaces you can use. That's the .NET framework, and that's not the runtime. So does the .NET framework come with Windows applications? Of course it does. Because what would C# be, or VB, if you didn't have a .NET framework to help you with, right? Oh, you'd code so much more and get it wrong so many times, right? So much stuff is in the .NET framework. We used to call it the .NET framework for WinRT, right? But now we call everything Windows apps. So now it's the .NET framework for Windows apps. But it is a tailored down version of the .NET framework. And the reason it's tailored down is because there are things that you can't do in Windows apps that you can in desktop, like wreck people's machines. Some of those APIs were removed. Some other APIs were put down into the WinRT, or the Windows runtime, right? The WinRT. The Windows runtime has those features as well, so that if you're writing a DirectX application that doesn't use the .NET framework, you want to be able to write a file too, and so you can, because we've made it universal in the Windows runtime. Same thing with HTML applications, JavaScript applications. They also want to read and write files. They also want to interact with things. They can. All they have to do is use the .NET framework that ships with it. And so is .NET dead? That's like saying XAML is dead. You don't get it if you're asking that question, right? Of course it's not dead. Of course not. I've got about 60 more slides, so this is not going right. Okay. Okay. Woo, Betsy. Okay. Talked about that. Oh, boy, this is a good one. All right. So, Jerry, you want me to code in XAML? Well, I could also write all this in Objective-C, I hear. And because, we have an iPhone app, and it's pretty successful. I've got, several downloads. I could easily use the bridge. That is called the bridge, right? I could easily use the Objective-C bridge. Why in the world would you tell me to use XAML? Does that run on iPhone? No, it does not. Okay, so I'll write it in Objective-C. Great. Suffer through that, right? That'll be awesome. But I can do it all in Visual Studio now. I even have a UI designer. Yeah, you do. But you don't have C#. You don't have the .NET framework. You don't have Blend. You don't have all the tooling around everything that we've got in our entire ecosystem. You just have support for Objective-C. How important is that? Very important. Because if you do have an iPhone app, we want to make it brain dead simple for you to bring it onto Windows. Yeah, we might have a small shortage of apps on Windows. Maybe. Okay. Same story with Android, right? I mean, that sounded sarcastic, but it's true. I mean, I'm happy about this. There are many iPhone apps that will make me have to listen to my wife complain about not having them. Like, it'll be great. That part alone, I'm on board. Android's the same story. Why are we supporting Android? It's because there are so many Android apps. How many of them are good? There are many good Android apps, right? Turns out Microsoft has 5 of the top 5 Android apps in the Google Play Store. How cool is that? Turns out we also have that. So some of them are good, right? Well, I don't know. I don't know what I implied, but I didn't mean to. The same thing with iPhone, right? The Apple Store is loaded with Microsoft apps now. It is awesome, right? If we're going to win, we got to win. Right? If you can't beat them, join them. And so now all those apps that are on these different platforms, right? There are Android users that don't have iPhone apps in there, or certain iPhone apps they want, and there's iPhone users that don't have certain Android apps they want. All those things are there. Do we allow that cross-pollination? No, that's not what we do. No. We allow you to take all those apps and bring them to the Windows platform with as little resistance as possible. That's the goal. Does it mean that like greenfield apps should be written then as Java apps or as Objective-C apps? No. Come on. Look at why it's there. Don't misread it, right? That's kind of like link baiting it, right? That's what people do. That's not what we're doing. All right. What about web? What about web? What about this HTML? So I can build a website. Did you see this announcement? I can build a website. I can wrap it in a quick little store wrapper, and it becomes an app. And I can do everything. I can have a tile. I can interact with sensors. I can do anything that I want. Shouldn't I write this just as a website? If you want, yeah. Is a website ever going to perform as well as a native XAML application that was written for Windows, tuned for Office, and expanded by all of the Bing MSN apps? No, of course not, right? Of course not. Of course not. And what kind of app do we want to write? The best? Yeah, of course. All right. The last one is, I don't even know what that's about. WinRT, our native platforms, flagship. That's just words. All right. Look at that. Look at all that stuff. Oh, the last thing that's worth saying is, I'm an evangelist, which means I'm in the field, which means I talk to guys like you all the time. And it used to be in Windows 8 that the voice that we would say was, if you want to write in DirectX, do it. If you want to write in HTML, do it. If you want to write in C# and XAML, do it. It's up to you. You decide. You weigh it all out. You research all this stuff. You do performance testing. You figure out what's right. Okay, you hate our platform already, but that's what we would say. And we didn't mean to. It's just what came out, right? And now evangelism is changing so that we genuinely will say to you, when you're going to write a new app, write a XAML app unless you want to write something else, right? I mean, that's got to be the truth, right? There are other choices and you can take them, but start with XAML unless you've got a reason not to. That's awesome, right? So now not only is the platform super, but now even our language and guidance is getting better so that we can direct you towards the best possible choice for you, but leave it open for you to do whatever you want to. Okay, well, I got 10 minutes left. That's quite a little monologue. All right. Does XAML have, I'm not going to, yes. Okay, great. All right, here's the demo. All right, okay. Let's look at XAML practically speaking. Okay, so this is just a survey of XAML. So remember, we're in second grade together. It's fun, right? We're going to go into third grade. This is some prep, some preliminary MSAT. Is that MSAT? It's essay? What's it? It's 3 letters. ESAT? My daughters just took it. Come on now. There it is. All right, so all we want to do is get a survey. Like, what do we actually have here? So here is the omnibus solution to show you everything that XAML can do, right? Isn't this appealing? Don't you wish I would share this code? So this code, by the way, is all on GitHub already, right? Written by the XAML team. So it's pretty great. I've actually added to it. Next week, I have an MVA, Microsoft Virtual Academy course. So I have several Microsoft Virtual Academy courses. I'm always doing XAML courses, right? And with Windows 10, so I just did the Windows Developer's Guide to Windows 10 Preview, right? It was 10 quick sessions, and each session was about where Windows was about a month and a half ago, which was rough, honestly. That was tough. But now we're where Windows is now. I mean, it's not exactly polished, to be honest, but we're a lot farther. And so I have a 3-day MVA that's coming up next week, and so this is in prep for that, to be honest, and all the stuff we've added to it. But let's just walk through some of the things that we do have. The first is around engagement. So I want the user to take an action. And so where's the ribbon go? Remember a ribbon? The ribbon's fantastic. Didn't you hate us when we put the ribbon in Office? Isn't it weird that you put that in all your apps now? I mean, it's just one of those things. And it just takes a while. But just like Microsoft, we take a good thing and deprecate it. Okay, so there's no longer a ribbon, but there's a command bar. And if you remember apps from Windows 8, then the command bar is always at the bottom. What was the logic of the command bar at the bottom? Anybody? The logic was, thank you for that. The logic was, that's where your fingers were when you're holding your tablet, right? Do-do-do-do-do. Of course, we all didn't have tablets back then. They were all non-touch laptops, so we're figuring out why Windows 8 even exists. But that's where it was, right? And so the idea is you wouldn't have to take your hand off to go up to the top. Well, as it turns out, you guys like to take your hands off, go up to the top. That's just the way it goes. So now we see the pattern changing so that now all the command bars, nonetheless, it's still the command bar, just a bar of buttons that you can go through. So we have a standard control. Let me switch this over to white. We have a standard control inside XAML. That's the command bar. You can see it along the top. That's a command bar. You can see it along the bottom. There's another command bar with a button that's currently toggled. You can expand the command bar like this so you can see the text under it. It has secondary commands. It's a white on white, so it's a little challenging, but there's a secondary command that pops up, says help right there, and then any other list of secondary commands that I would create. We have this on the phone already. Remember how you can hit the dot, dot, dot on the side, and it all slides up, and you can... That's exactly what it is. Where are all the commands on the left? That's up to you as a developer. You can easily put commands on the left, but by default we don't do that anymore. Secondary commands follow the phone way because you guys loved the way that worked. I mean that, and you really did. And so you see a lot of these converged controls following the phone because there was a love affair with Windows Phone. Maybe only 3% of you were really using it, but the ones who did were all about it. And every time we tweak the UI, it's like hate mail from hell, man. I mean, it's unbelievable. All right. Another thing, and it's hard to tell maybe because of the just the contrast of this, is here's another command bar right here. So you don't have to put it at the top and bottom like we did in Windows 8. You can put it wherever you want. So this is a lot like the menu, maybe it's just menu. The menu control in Windows. We also have a context menu. Didn't have that before. Now you can, if you want a context menu and you want it to be multi-tiered so you can go down into it, all of that's there as well. All right, so I wanted to show you just the commanding. And let's see, did I happen to have the toggle button? So all the stuff that you would expect, right? That's the normal business. But we also have these data controls. Data controls like a grid view, for example, yes. Like a data grid, for example, no. We do not have a data grid. The data grid, remember in WPF and Windows Forms, and even in ASP.NET and MVC, you would create a table that would have all of your data coming down in tabular form. Very useful. Excel looking, right? Very useful. I mean that. And but we don't have that in. It's not touch friendly. We know that it's not touch friendly, and so we don't have that in Windows 10 or any XAML framework that Microsoft makes. Instead, it's all third party that brings it in. Even the data grid tool that we finally introduced in WPF is nothing compared to the third-party tools like Infragistics and Telerik Build, right? Theirs are just terrific, right, compared to ours. Ours is really bare bones. And so there's a few controls. The first one is this flip view control. Oh, it's not a touch screen. The first one is this flip view control, and that's it over here with the picture, and it allows me to flip through things. That's all that it does. Imagine doing this on WPF. Could you do it? Of course, of course. Could you do it super easy just like this? No, it actually was kind of a pain. It's really neat that this works as well as it does. Touch-friendly, mouse-friendly. I can use my mouse wheel, whatever it is. It'll interact with the way I want it to, right? All of these controls work correctly on the phone. Get a little bit bigger on the phone sometimes so you can touch them, and then can detect a mouse, and they can have full mouse support as well. All of them do. This used to be a different story. It used to be harder to tell this story because we didn't have this full convergence. We have full convergence now, so it's not even an issue. Then we have the grid view. So remember I said there's no data grid, but there is a grid view. And in fact, this is a grid view right here on the right that shows all of these items in a grid. That's the way that we work, right? This is sort of the Microsoft style. In fact, we refer to it as the Microsoft Design Language, the MDL, and right now we're at MDL 2, right? Some of you might jokingly call it Metro 2, but I don't get that, right? I don't know what that means because we don't use that word anymore. But, who's from Germany here? No, I'm teasing. Unless you happen to work for Metro, that'd be incredible. That would be incredible. No, you know what? I don't want to know. I don't want to know. All right, so this is the grid view, and it has a sister control called the list view. And so this is the list view. Doggone, it's not touchscreen. It looks so touchscreeny. The list view is a vertical scrolling grid view. Is it different than the grid view very much? Almost not at all. In fact, in Windows 10, they almost are the same control. Why? Because the grid view defaults to vertical too. They are really, really similar. Really similar. I was trying to separate them in my mind the other day, and I couldn't. I really could not. And I'm not saying that as a joke. They seem like the same control now. But nonetheless, they all inherit from items control. So if you are a XAML developer, then you know this. A repeater, so think of like ASP.NET when you repeat. A repeater control that takes a list of data and then shows that list of data, does it by using the items control, with an S, items control. And that's the way it works. We would put it in an items control. It'll read the list, and every one of them, it'll apply a template, apply a template, apply a template, apply a template. Maybe it's not vertical, whatever panel you give it. So it's a vertical panel or a horizontal panel or a wrap panel or whatever it is you give it. It'll fill that for you, or grid view. It'll fill that for you as well. So that's the items control. You'll see it in the combo box, standard combo box, picks the state you want to ship to. Yeah, that's an items control. A list box, so you scroll down and pick the classes you want to take. That is an items control. The grid view is an items control. The data grid in WPF, that's an items control. That is the ultimate base. In fact, you can just create an items control. You don't have to create the full controls that are built on top of it. Many times, I will just instantiate an items control in XAML. The reason is, all I want to do is repeat stuff. I don't want a whole bunch of mess, right? Just do it, and it's great. All right, so that's what a list view is, our other items control. And then we also have semantic zoom. You can't click it, Jerry. But yeah, I'll show you semantic zoom. Tremendously nice. Semantic zoom is kind of new. Because we don't have a data grid, and so everything's really tight in a tabular way, it means that if you've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of records, it means that you can't, it means your users hate you because they have to scroll so many times in order to get to it. There's got to be a quicker way to jump to the end, right? There's just got to be a way. Maybe I could grab the scroll bar. Well, you know, the design language says that the scroll bar is not visible on touch. So how am I supposed to get to the end? That's where semantic zoom comes in. So semantic zoom, it's not like optical zoom makes things bigger and smaller. It's just another way of looking at the same data. So, for example, I might have a list of states. Each of the states then is grouped together by its alphabetical letter, right? I'm going left to right for you. And I tap on the letter, and it all collapses, and I can only see the letter. That is a semantic zoom, right? So in this case, you can see there's this group with this line that says app bar commands, another one here, buttons, and then there's a section right below it. If I tap on the header, or click on it in this case, right, it takes me out to just the headers. And then if I select on one of these headers, like text controls, not only does it go back in, but it also navigates me down to the text controls. A quick way to navigate. If you use Windows Phone, you've been using this for a long, long time. But this is what we introduced to applications to allow you to quickly navigate larger sets. Another thing we do for larger sets is to make sure that you have 3 types of virtualization, which is built in and an important concept inside XAML. So the first type of virtualization says if it's not on the screen, we're not going to build it. So it's not built behind the scenes. Sometimes that has something to do with rendering. So you scroll as fast as you possibly can. Sometimes you can catch visual virtualization and see nothing on the screen at all, right? Because you're going so fast. There's ways to get around that, but I'm just trying to explain what visual virtualization is. That allows your application not to take as much memory and allows it to perform a lot faster because it doesn't have to render quite as much either. That is not the way other UI frameworks work. Other UI frameworks render everything no matter where it is, even if you never show it, right? It's different. That is how XAML works out of the box. You don't have to say, please enable visual virtualization. It's automatic. But there's also 2 other types. There's data virtualization. The first one around data virtualization is incremental virtualization. So in my grid view, I don't have 1,000 items. I have 1,000,000 items, right? I've already crashed your machine. But that's not what happens. And it's a little bit like paging. So I'm scrolling and I see them. And as I scroll, I get really close to the end. And you can set how close means to you. And as soon as I get close to the end, an event is raised that says, you better go get the next batch because the user's getting close, right? Sort of like infinite scroll in Facebook and Twitter, you know how they work? Same exact concept built into all the repeater controls in XAML. The final kind is random access virtualization that allows me to drag all the way to the end of my 1,000,000 records. And suddenly there it is. But I didn't have to bring all the ones in between. It's only where the page that I'm looking at that enables me to do that. So you get to pick as a developer which one you like, that infinite scroll or the ability to randomly go to it. It's sort of up to you. Okay, so we're looking at controls. Another control that was loved on phone is the pivot control. It really is a lovely control. And the pivot control, this is a ridiculously small sample, so you can't really see. They should have made some color or something. Where it says emails go here. It's ridiculous. But anyways, I click each one of these individually. It's just like a tab control works, right? In fact, on desktop, it can detect that it's on desktop. On desktop, it acts just like a tab control. You can center those so the tabs stay still and they don't move anywhere. But if it gets really long, you can scroll through them kind of like a tab control does anyway. But then I load it on phone, and it's totally different. It looks like the phone pivot, where I swipe from one to the other, and everything kind of moves with it. It's really, really nice. This is a great way, and if you think about it from pivoting, right? If you think of data warehousing and pivoting your cube or model, that's really what it was originally intended to do. You have all of your mail, and then I pivot on just unread, right? I pivot on the read, unread state, basically. And then I pivot again on the flag state, pivot again on the... It kind of works as a filter as well. It's really nice. And you see it used all over the place. All right, so that's another control that we have. And then the hub control is the control that sort of makes up everything. This is the base control, and all it is a control that seems to stack things on top of each other. But it has a couple of features that are really nice. One of them is, so if I have my start menu up, right, this is a hub control, right? Except for it goes down instead of up. And I group things in different groups. The groups have headings on them, but it's not enabled on the start menu. But a hub also has a see more. So I may only show 12 items. I may only show 40 items, whatever's right for you. I may only show one item, I guess. And you can go to see more, and it'll navigate you to somewhere, passing in an argument that you want, so that you can see all the items in that particular group. So it's really meant to group things together in the different hub sections, and then show them so the user can scroll through them. And then behind the scenes, what you don't see is all the performance that's built in. So it's all, kind of like double buffered, right? So it performs extremely well. Okay, so those are sort of our layout controls that we have. We also have a few flyout controls. So we weren't talking about it. You mentioned it, and you were right, that we have a context menu. And so this is this is the content dialog. I got the wrong one. We have a context menu, which is right. Well, I thought it was right here. Which is right here, right anywhere, wherever it is. You right-click it, and you see a context menu. You've all seen one before, so I don't need just know that it's there. But we also have this. This is the content dialog. In fact, if you're a Windows 8 XAML developer today, this is worth you knowing. Right? This is definitely a point that's important to know. There was no message box in Jupyter XAML. Remember that? That was kind of a gotcha. Like, where's my message box? I can't even show a pop-up. No, you couldn't. There was no message box. We replaced it with the message dialog. And the reason we replaced it with the message dialog is because we had to create an asynchronous wrapper around a way to show something to somebody. It was very confusing to not have a common control that everybody had already used. So as a result, we have deprecated the second control as well and created a third control called the content dialog, because it turns out that the message dialog was so limited that you couldn't put XAML inside it. And some people wanted things like a checkbox that says, I agree to these terms, or you fill in the blank, whatever it is, right? And so you couldn't do that. You'd have to create a custom pop-up and all these other things, and it was kind of a pain. So now there's content dialog, which is the replacement of message dialog, which is the replacement of message box, right? So just think of this as message box's youngest grandson, and you could be nice to him instead of making fun of him. Okay. There's no reason to be that way. All right, so a couple other controls are our text controls. So, of course, we have a text box. So hopefully you guys don't care about that. But we also have an auto-suggest box. In Windows 8, search was meant to be an OS feature, and your app would subscribe to the search in OS, right? That's gone. Nobody liked that idea. And it was totally undiscoverable. My mom never knew how to search because she didn't know to even swipe from the right because she didn't have a touch screen. She never moved her mouse to the corner because why would she? That doesn't even make sense. She would only move to the top left corner when she was trying to go back in the browser and mistakenly switch to another app because that's how you switch to an app. And there's so many funny things. So I say all that to say, search, you had to have a special search box that you would have that would tie in. But now that that's gone, why would you have a search box? Well, the problem is it was the solution for autocomplete in a XAML application, a field that you would type in, and it would give you all these suggestions along the way. Well, that's what I want. And so we had to get rid of the search box because there's no point anymore. It has no relevance to the operating system. So we created a new control. And guess what we called it? The auto-suggest box, exactly what it should be. This is where the naming people of Microsoft must have been on vacation, and so some people named it a normal sort of name. We have the ability to edit rich text, which I think is terrific, right? Hopefully you already know this. So this is, I can go in, I can make things bold, I can treat it almost like Word, but it's RTF format rather than Word, of course, right? So I can do all kinds of neat things to my text. I can give the user all kinds of capabilities to do whatever they want. if that's the right thing for my application. And of course, it has a corresponding text block as well. So in XAML, there's two types of text controls, a text box and a text block, right? You might be asking yourself, where's the label control? That was a really handy control in almost every UI framework I've ever used. There is no label control. We call it the text block. It's a block of text. You can't edit it. You can't do all kinds of things with it, but you can show text, and you can wrap it, and you can color it, and do all those sorts of things, of course. But how do you show text? You use a text block. How do you take in text as far as input? You use a text box. You could use the password box, right? That's a text box that shows everything as dots. And it has that little password reveal button. It's really nice. And or you can use the rich text box to let them edit all they want, or use the rich text block to let us to then present rich text back to the user. So there's text boxes that allow input, and there are text blocks that allow you to show it, right? That makes sense. Does to me, at least, and so I'm feeling good about it. Layout controls are really the foundational piece, and I'm going to try and reference everything in terms of HTML, because HTML, most of us know, I think. How many people here know what I mean when I say an HTML table? Yeah. That's great. I just wanted to get you guys moving, to be honest. I knew you knew, because you guys look smart, most of you. So the first control we have is the stack panel. The stack panel is sort of like the div control, right? And so everything you put in it, let's see, a div sets them side by side, I think, until it runs out of room, and then it goes. And then you could set a line, you set presentation. What is it? You can set it so it makes it every line. Doesn't matter. What it does is it takes any children that you put in it, because this can take any number of children, and it lays them out right on top of each other. Even if they aren't quite the same size, that's no big deal. It lays them out. And you can swap it. You can say orientation horizontal, and it goes side by side. And you see this in all kinds of things. Like even if I were just looking at this, I can tell that over on the left is some variant of a stack panel, stacking all those buttons up there. I mean, I could tell. I can just tell. In fact, I would assume that this is a vertical stack panel, and right here is a very small horizontal stack panel, taking its icon and its text, right? I would assume that. I mean, that's how I'd likely build it. It could potentially be another control, the grid control. The grid control is like the HTML table. And so a grid control, I could set up 1, 2 columns, and then I could set up all these rows as well. And I could, as I add things to it, I say you belong in this grid column and this grid row, and it renders it there for you, right? And just like in an HTML table, I can span multiple columns and I can span multiple rows, right? It's totally up to me, and I can move things around as much as I want to, and it always renders it correctly. So this could be a stack panel with a series of stack panels. This could be a grid with 2 columns and a whole bunch of rows, and it's filling those up. I don't know what it really is, but it's one of those probably. Or it could be something, I don't know what it is. I just said that. All right, so then we have another control. Another control is our relative panel. And this is a powerful control. And so the relative panel says whatever I put inside this panel, and remember, these all inherit from a base class called panel. And so if you're wondering like what this is, it's a panel control, and because they all inherit from panel, which means it can have multiple children. That's what it really means. Because other types of controls that might be able to have children can only have one child, right? So for example, a button. A button can have a child. How many children can it have? 1. But that first one could be a panel. And then I could put all kinds of things in a button. I could put a grid in a button. I could put my entire scrolling virtualized data grid in the button if I wanted to. Don't do it. The relative panel is where we were headed. So this could have been put together by a relative panel. A relative panel takes any number of children. The first child works as the anchor. And you say to it, for example, Visual Studio up there would be the first one, let's say. And I say the Visual Studio first anchor is aligned to the top left of the overall panel. And that's where it is. Just pretend. Then I say the text Visual Studio 2015 CTP. There's nothing embarrassing, right? Yeah, no. Okay, good. Not there would have been. I'm just saying. I say Visual Studio 2015 CTP, which I know is probably a text block, right? Because it's just text. I say that text block is to the right of Visual Studio, and it makes it to the right. It does it every time. I take that Visual Studio and move it around. That text block follows it because it's always to the right of it. That's nice. That's nice. And then I can also align it. I can say I want it center, I want it vertically or horizontally aligned in certain ways, and the relative panel allows me to do that too. And I could say then Internet Explorer, the E, which I would say the E is probably a grid with a single column and row, probably. And then it's probably filled with blue, which is probably taken from the system color. And then it has an image inside that grid, so it's on top of the color. I would say that's probably how they made that. That's what I would guess. So I take the grid that has the E in it, and I would say you are below the icon for Visual Studio. Perfect, right? Move Visual Studio, it stays with it too. So does the text for Visual Studio. That's the relative panel. Keep on going. I can say this is related to that, this is related to that, all the way down. And what's terrific is I can rearrange them just as easily. I could say something like Camtasia is now no longer below Sticky Notes. It's now below Project Spartan, right? And it suddenly goes, bloop, and it's below Project Spartan instead, right? Just like that. And I can use animations and things like that to make it cool if I want to. But this is second grade, not third grade, so there's no animations today. I have three, well, no, this is way too, no, you know what, never mind that part. Just know there's also that. The Canvas is the second most popular one. The Canvas is completely GPU accelerated, which means no matter what you do inside it, as long as you're doing it with Canvas operations, it is moving and it is offloading all of the rendering to the GPU of the device, so it's super fast. As a result, you see a lot of games written using XAML end up using the Canvas because it's so fast, right? The Canvas in XAML is identical in concept and mostly in execution too to the Canvas in HTML5 too, right? Super high performant, and all you do is XY coordinate, but it's all up to you from that point forward about how big things are, small things are, where they're laid out, handling screen resolution and stuff like that, because it goes exactly where you want it to, right? Unlike, say, like a grid, which I could say is 100% wide, and as the screen gets wider, it gets wider too, right? And so all the things move around inside it. If you put it inside a canvas and you say this has got to be, the top and left are both 100 pixels from the side, and you stretch it, right, it's going to stay 100 pixels from the side over here, like it or not. So that's why a canvas is awesome, and it's why a canvas is difficult too. We have introduced the split view. The hamburger button at last. We've all been pining for it. And so now I can go in, you see there's a split view button even up here, where I can hit that the 3 thing, you know, that's the hamburger button. And so I can go in and I can say a couple things. I can open and close it. Wow, but you couldn't write that control. And then I could change it so it doesn't just do like that, but it uses it goes like this. This is really nice. It actually is a sweet control when you start seeing all the things it can do. And it allows me to have a menu system to offload unusual commands that I still want to have available or whatever that is. But it looks the way you want it to look. It's totally up to you as a developer. The last one I want to point out is the view box, because this is how a lot of developers solve the size of the screen problem. They'll write an application and they'll build it to their incredible device, right? Every developer has a fine device. And they are writing it and everything works just dandy. And then they run it on their crappy users' machines. And they're like, not only is it slow, it cuts off the screen. I can't even see the side of it. How am I supposed to use your application? You roll your eyes, you know, in 2 weeks I'll have a solution sort of thing. Well, the 1-minute solution is to wrap your entire application in a view box. Why? Because a view box says, I will always be the size of the screen, or whatever size you make it, but usually the screen, right? And anything inside it will always be visible. Because if I get too small, like that so it doesn't fit, I'll just shrink the stuff to fit. And I'll shrink it uniformly so it looks good until the buttons are so small that the user can't touch them, right? But I'll do it. That's why a view box is awesome, and that's why a view box is awful, right? And so you just have to know that's what it's meant to do. So I might have a grid, by the way, and inside that grid I have a whole bunch of pictures, and I'll go ahead and put a view box because I know that grid is going to be slightly variable based on the density of the screen that it's in. Great. The view box will make sure in those slight variations it always looks right. That's what I want. Whether or not I do an entire application depends. It just depends. I mean, you either put that in your application if you're a regular employee and you're tired and you don't like working, or you rewrite your UI if you're paid by the hour, right? It's up to you. You know what I mean. I don't know why I didn't show you what a ViewBox did rather than just talk about it. Here is does it expand? Yes, it will expand. If you set it to expand, it'll follow the screen as well. Yeah. For example, so here it is. This is a ViewBox expanding, and the content inside it is also expanding, but that's because the ViewBox is expanding it. And it's worth pointing out that this is using what we refer to as a render transform, and it's offloading everything off to the GPU to do this execution. And so even though it's doing all this zooming work, it's really not. It's just handing it off to the GPU, which can do it just fine. If I change the way that it stretches, you can see that it doesn't have to make it uniform. It can make a circle look like an oval sort of thing. Or I can say I want it to be uniform as well. Uniform to fill is a little different. That says fill it, but it doesn't matter if it gets clipped off the edge. Uniform means fill it, but don't clip it, so keep shrinking until you're finally fitting. This is what most people pick, right? They pick the uniform so you can see it. One nice thing that it does, if you write your application so it's 16 by 9 as far as aspect ratio, you can put it in a view box, and then you run it on a 3x4 or, yeah, 3x4, like Surface is 3x4. Then it's you'll see letterboxing, because it's trying to fix it, and there's nothing wrong with a view box. You just have to be careful where you use it so you don't make things look really goofy. Okay, I don't have too much time to show you very much more, but I wanted to. Nope, that's not what I want to do. I wanted to show you two things that are just worth seeing. The first is the introduction of the ink canvas. So this is brand new to us. We have two things that make up inking. We have the ink presenter. There's a lot of words, man. Okay, there's the ink presenter, which is what we're calling it today. And that's the set of APIs underneath that make all the inking work. This is a big deal because Microsoft's really banking on a differentiation of the pen, right? If you've ever used Note, like one of the notes, an Android Note, right? The Note. That's nice, right? You can really appreciate that. Introducing that to every device is awesome. I mean, Microsoft's really hoping it's going to be tremendous. We are highly invested in the specification for digital pens now on how they accept pressure. And even though there's been a lot of work by Bamboo and guys like that, and we even bought one of them just like a week ago, they just didn't have the wherewithal to really make a difference in the industry like we are going to, right? It's sort of like when Windows 8 shipped, and we're like, soon it will be hard to find devices that aren't touchscreen. And right, we all rolled our eyes at that. We're like, golly, I've been to Best Buy, I think I know. But the reality is, it is hard all of a sudden. Both of these monitors, they're not set up properly, but that's not my fault. They're both touchscreen. That's awesome. My laptop is touchscreen. My phone is touchscreen. That's silly. All right, so it's just one of those things, and inking is a huge investment for Microsoft. And so here we have inking, and you can ink two ways. Oh, there are two things, right? The ink presenter, that's the set of APIs if you want to do this on your own raw, right? And you might want to because you might want to extend it. But there's also the ink canvas, what I just drag on, make it the size that I want to, and say on, right? And it's ready to go. And the user takes out their pen, and they start writing, and it just works. And it's absolutely beautiful, right? It's just absolutely fantastic. It does all the Bezier curves for you so that it looks right. It will take your handwriting, turn it into text for you. It will save this as an image. It will save this as ink so you can load it back up. It will allow you to erase. It is tremendous, right? And so now you can drag this on and just have this capability, and it works on every class of device so far, right? That's a big deal. Even the lowest end phone, you can have full handwriting recognition if you want it. That's awesome. So this team has really done some miraculous things to make this work. And now it's just a tool in your toolbox. It's just a thing you can drag on. Why wouldn't you have ink recognition? I mean, doesn't even make sense not to. Well, what if they don't have a pen? Use a mouse. What if they don't want to use a mouse? Use a finger. Fingering. I mean, whatever you want, it's all there. What if they don't have a touch machine? And what if they're blind and they use Braille? All right, well, okay. All right, I can finally come up with a scenario that they're not going to do. All right, so the ink canvas was that one, and then the last one is this idea of the media element. And so this is cool for a couple of reasons. So I have can you hear? Play his music. That's great. All right. I thought it was a phone going off. I'm like, who is the jerk? And then it was me. I knew it wasn't you guys. I mean, it would be an IT person walking by that had their phone in. This is the control. This is the actual UI control, right? 2 of them. And you saw the videos playing. So the first one is blank. I move my mouse over it. It's just showing a video. You see the video. Maybe I include it here, include it there so I can have some animation. Terrific. That's the way that it works. Or maybe I go over here and it gives me the full fidelity of a media control. Now, more than just full fidelity. Wait till you see what it can do. So I can adjust the sound, hoop-de-doo. I can start and pause. Of course you can. I can make it full screen. That's right. This button on the far right allows me to zoom in if I want to. And then I've got this button right here that I'm not mousing over so you can't see the tooltip, right? What is this little piece of magic? That is your tie-in to the new casting framework in Windows 10. So the casting framework in Windows 10 has several ways for me to be able to connect to another device. I can use dial, D-I-A-L, device, application launch, device inspection or something. It finds a device, finds the app that's on it, and it runs it. So this is the way Netflix works on Chromecast, right? This is the way it works. You want the Chromecast, it starts to run it, right? And the way that works, there are 2 apps. There's an app on Chromecast, and there's an app on your device, and they talk to each other. One starts the other, and it starts to run. That's dial, and I can interact with dial thanks to this. But I also have DLNA. DLNA means I can find my Samsung TV that's a DLNA receiver, and I can say, here's some media for you. I'm literally passing the MP4 to it. It decodes it for me. I'm just passing the file. It decodes it for me, and my application now becomes just the remote control for that DLNA device. Now I can cast over that device. I can also cast my full screen if I want to. I forget what that one's called. I think it's just called Projection Manager, where I can take that and I can project that over to another screen as well. So I have a lot of different options, and each of them is enabled through the media element that you just drag on and it just starts to work, right? It's really, really nice. As far as just device interaction, I wouldn't have had to have done anything. It will automatically cast that video for me to my LG TV that happens to be a DLNA receiver, right? So it's a lot of cool power just because it's part of the XAML toolbox. It's just, you get it for free. It's really, really nice. All right. That was, let me see. Oh, that's my last slide. Terrific. Oh, and I'm out of time. All right. Last thing I want you to hear, and I mean this honestly. MicrosoftVirtualAcademy.com is really a great option if you're wondering how to get started, right? It's just great. I mean, all the XAML, I know that I teach all the XAML courses on it, but it's Microsoft's plural site, right? It's a free place for you to go for online classes. Every class you go to is all day long, and it's taught by people who genuinely know it and typically love it, right? And so you get a great experience. Michael Palermo's in the back. He knows HTML5 and JavaScript like nobody you've ever met, and he teaches courses on it too. It's just the way to go. And so anyway, just don't miss out on MicrosoftVirtualAcademy.com. A lot of developers don't even know that it exists, and it's a very rich resource for you. The other is, I want to encourage you one last time around XAML, but I want to step back to WPF. All I've talked about is all the Windows work, or Jupyter work, right? The forward-looking XAML. But WPF is still awesome. All the WinRT APIs that I've been talking about, casting and everything like that, are all part of WPF as well. So if you're writing a line of business application, everything I've shown you, at least in concept, exists in WPF as well. And all of the framework and fundamentals are there too. So if you're like, well, I guess I need to rewrite all my WPF apps, you didn't hear me right. Right? You didn't hear me right. If you're greenfield apps, I think probably you should go with Jupyter. But if you're building a desktop application that it's never going to run on phone. I'm just not interested in HoloLens. This isn't really meant for a Raspberry Pi. This is meant to run my internal inventory management system for my company, and we're going to spend $4 million writing it. Is WPF still a good choice? So good. So good. WPF is awesome. And I don't know. I don't know if I'm married to Jupyter and WPF is like a mistress, or if I don't know, but they're both great, And there's something really neat about just working it, and it's nice. So, if you're a XAML developer today, congratulations. If you're not a XAML developer today, I dare you to give me a great reason not to, without the reason of, I don't code on the Microsoft framework. Right? That is the only reason it makes sense not to get involved in it. Okay, that's the whole session. Thanks for coming, everybody. Have a great night.